Sectoral Analysis, which is a new podcast by Sector 3. This is a space where we are going to discuss very interesting issues with interesting guests on a weekly basis. And I'm delighted to have our first guest joining us from Washington, D.C. Please welcome Professor Natalia Dinello, who is from George Washington University. She's a director of Global Residencies Program, and I'm delighted that this year the program was dedicated to Georgia. Unfortunately, the plan was to have you here, but well, as we all see and we feel, the COVID-19 has changed the plans of the program. But I'm overwhelmed that we managed to still have an e-residency program. And I think it's going to be very interesting to discuss if we have met the objectives, what were the expectations, what were the lessons learned, and what are the future plans. So now let's go to Natalia and welcome you to our first podcast. Thank you for joining, and let's right away start. Like, why Georgia? Why did you decide this year to...
Well, first of all, hello from Washington, D.C. Greetings, and many thanks to Ketevan. Of course, I'm very happy to be a guest on your broadcast, on your podcast, and it is actually thanks to Ketevan that not only I'm appearing here, but that the online program with Georgia, and of course we were planning a trip, but unfortunately had to cancel a trip, that all this happened. So many thanks to you. So why Georgia? Well, there are many reasons for that. Well, first, like looking in terms of the content and in most substantive terms, Georgia is an extremely strategically important country in the spot where Europe meets Asia. It is a country with very rich history, with very interesting culture. And as John Steinbeck said, a magic country, a magic place with magic people. So this is certainly a big trigger for having a program in Georgia and about Georgia. Also, it is a very important partner and becoming even more important partner with the United States. So United States and Georgia have already good relations, and I hope that they will even improve further. We are very much interested, of course, in your transformation to a democratic and market-style economy. At the same time, having concern for your people, for social security of your people, but also for national security and global security. So all these issues certainly bring us to Georgia and to learning about Georgia, and of course to connecting with our dear friends in Georgia.
If I may go into a bit more details, because we were all looking forward and we were so all engaged, and it was a really important partnership. And once again, thank you so much to George Washington University, to our program, for being interested, but also to all the other actors who were partners, starting from Sector 3 to Endowment for Demos, CDD, and also a lot of interesting guests have joined. But I wanted to hear a bit more of insight from your side of the ocean, how it seemed, like what was the biggest lessons learned from this residency program? Maybe there were some disappointments or big surprises about Georgia that you found out.
Well, I first have to say no disappointments at all. I think everything was indeed amazing. Well, the first, I mentioned, this quote about magic people. We were really so impressed by the skills, by receptivity, by generosity in sharing the perspectives of all speakers. They were so distinguished. And what was very, very kind of not surprising, but impressive, that most of them were very, very young people who already have such big achievements for themselves, professional, but also achievements for the country. So this was one of the lessons. The second lesson was, and in a way it's related to the first one, that about your aspirations for being a part of the European Union, to be a part of NATO, and it was absolutely a reiterating theme that you are, a part of Europe. At the same time, you want to preserve Georgia as Georgia, which is, I think, a wonderful, wonderful statement and a very important thesis. And connecting with my first point, given the skills, education, commitment, energy, enthusiasm of the people who are leading the country, including you, Ketevan, including your colleagues. This is another very major, I think, kind of lesson learned. And maybe the third one is going to my earlier point about the strategic location of Georgia. You know, you are very much dependent also, and I would say mutually dependent, not just dependent, on the countries that are around you. Going through history, and actually we had in our course a special component dedicated to the Georgian history. Georgia did the best when it was in peace with empires. Yes, you have a grand and not necessarily always peaceful and very friendly empires. But whenever you found accommodation, whenever you found adaptation, whenever you were able to preserve security and peace, then Georgia flourished. So basically, I would say you are the natural peacemakers. So this is, I think, one of the also lessons learned. There are many others, but I don't want to go into like a very long list.
Well, we are actually looking forward to hearing all the different pieces that are going to be written from your brilliant, brilliant participants of the program. I have to also say from our side, we were so delighted to see such an amazing bios and people with such a background being interested in Georgia and learning about Georgia. So it was truly an honor. I have to use this opportunity. You mentioned about, we are moving towards more global issues now. I mean, our geographical location, but also let's you know, we can not face the crisis or pandemic that we are all surrounded. Well, it has affected our program, but it has also affected the world. And you have you know, PhD in economy and all the world, like we are now watching what's going to happen after. Well, of course, we are still in pandemic period, but you know, it's going to be interesting to hear a bit more, like what can we expect? What could be the challenges or maybe even opportunities, you know, for a country like Georgia or a country like US? So what would you, how do you see this pandemic moving, you know, after how life's moving on?
Before trying to answer your question, I have to say that it's actually very important that we were able to have even an online program with very, very high-profile speakers, again, thanks to you, in the midst of this global crisis. I think it tells about the level of your perseverance. And as I mentioned a second ago, that Georgia is known for persevering through many crises and through many conflicts and still, you know, finding its way and still remaining to be Georgia and still preserving its language, it's still preserving its culture. So, and also on the part of our students, I think I was happy to see that many joined, that they were quite, you know, attentive, active participants, very much engaged. So it tells about your perseverance, but also the perseverance of our students. And just one probably comment about our students. Our students are not just kind of regular average students. They are already influential political professionals. They are already working in or around politics in DC, in the District of Columbia, in Washington, DC. So it means, and we are located 2 blocks from the White House, they already are able to influence certain policies. For example, we had several participants with very distinguished military and security backgrounds in intelligence. We had a participant who is advising a US congressman on defense and security. And also, just to mention the last thing, for example, one of the groups that we educate are the so-called US Army Congressional Fellows. These are the best of the US military who apply for our program in the Masters of Legislative Affairs. And after receiving this degree, they go on the Capitol, they go to the Capitol Hill, they go into the US Congress to advise the House representatives or senators. So it just gives you a sense of the not only both current influence and also potential influence of our alumni. So you made the right choice in terms of partnering with us.
Absolutely, and I'm so delighted once again, and we're looking forward so much for a continuation of our partnership, because we are honestly, also all the speakers were so delighted to be part of the program. But as you said, I mean, it was very important discussions. I mean, we were not discussing this only with like the participants of, you know, short-term visitors program. It was clear that we were discussing with already working analysts and already working politicians, basically. So to this question, you basically have mentioned that you are working with the leaders of, of tomorrow. And I think it's going to be very interesting to hear from you. Like, what would be your advice to the future leaders? We are going through very interesting times. I think the world is going through interesting times and difficult times. So it's going to be interesting to hear from you, the leaders creator from the George Washington University. What would be your recommendation during this pandemic, but also after the pandemic?
The first one is, I would say that the investment in healthcare is economically effective. So you can just see, not only the predictions of how much the global economy will decline, because they change all the time, and they change not in the positive direction, but also the entire world basically is suffering, and probably is going to suffer even more, because I just, today there was a report that was broadcast on BBC that the developing countries, which are most vulnerable, let's say African countries, the epidemic will reach them probably in 3 months. So, given the state of healthcare in these countries, and given that we live in the globalized world, it can affect also everyone. So the first one, again, the investment absolutely is effective, it's needed, and it is a priority. The second one is, how you manage it. How you manage it economically, politically. Certain epidemiological centralization, of this kind of management of the epidemics is absolutely necessary. Of course, it's relatively easier, but depending on the resources, to do it in a relatively small country. It's much more difficult to do it in a large country, where, let's say, in the United States, a lot of decisions are made by the states. Yes, but where there are even no borders, right? Not to say no porous, not porous borders, but there are no borders. So, certain centralization is absolutely necessary. And my third point, again, a very general point, whether we want it or not, we live in the globalized world. We live in the world where we travel, where we do very extensive trade, where we also exchange services. It is how it is, and it is good, because we have an opportunity to learn about different cultures, to learn about people from different backgrounds. It is wonderful. But what it requires managing also things at the global level. It's not good when we give up on, for example, WHO, World Health Organization. It has its own drawbacks, it has its own weaknesses, but it has to be strengthened rather than weakened. And the fourth point about, I said like Georgia. Well, Georgia, I was fortunate to be in Georgia, to visit Georgia several times. I'm fortunate to know a lot of Georgians. Of course, I'm very happy that this circle of the friendship expands now. I'm extremely happy. But I think you are such a generous, hospitable, heartwarming people. So for you, I believe the hospitality sector is actually very, very natural, very natural. So, again, you are doing a lot in this respect. And we had, of course, the conversation with the head of tourism administration, Ms. Miriam Kvirishvili, which was very, very interesting, extremely interesting. But some other speakers spoke about it. For example, the deputy CEO of Enterprise Georgia and many others. the development of tourism, and particularly unique type of tourism. So let's say ecotourism or food and wine, or wine and food tourism. These are absolutely great opportunities, you know, building on your resources, developing your skills even further. You know, this would be great. And another thing is what came to mind and what was actually kind of highlighted about Georgia is the state of your agriculture. Still 50% of the people working in agriculture, 92% of them are considered to be self-employed. I think the full realization that some things have to happen. It is also the realization that somewhat agriculture has to be modernized, that there is a need for land reform, sure. But at the same time, I have to tell you, out of all countries that I have visited, you know, recently, and I was before working also for the United Nations, so I visited a lot of countries, you can imagine. It is only in Georgia that you can find tomato that tastes like tomato. It is only in Georgia and probably in Armenia that you can find the apricot or peach as really tasting as peach. So my point would be, yes, modernization, but unfortunately modernization and, you know, introducing certain technologies in agriculture is often at the cost of taste. Kind of high quality agriculture could be, I think, potentially very good kind of niche maybe for Georgia. But again, with the caveat, I'm saying this, that I'm really not an expert in this area. It's just my observations about the culture, about you wonderful people, and about, you know, the challenges that you have at this point.
Well, thank you, Natalia, so much. You know, we love friends like you. We are delighted to have you as a friend of Georgia, as a friend of ours. We are looking forward to have you in Georgia to show you the developments that you have been hearing that. And hopefully it's going to happen soon. And I know you're a big fan of Georgian wine, and I hope we'll be able to take you to the homeland of the wine in Georgia. And well, thank you so much for joining us today, this early hour and your time. And we're delighted to once again have the opportunity and the partnership that we have managed to start. I'm sure it's going to continue in the future. Yeah, well, I guess that was our first podcast. I hope to see you next time as well. And well, this was the Sectoral Analysis, and this is a new podcast by Sector 3. Well, see you next time.